Hi, folks. I'm Father Joe Grimaldi. You can call me Joe, and I'd like to welcome you to my podcast. But now, here's our host and friend, Ken Calvert.
Hello, everybody. I'm Ken Calvert alongside the good Padre, Father Joe Grimaldi, and we would like to welcome you to the Father Joe Grimaldi podcast. Boy, now is the time to visit Star Lincoln. Conveniently located 12 Mile Road, just east of Telegraph in Southfield. Incredible deals going on right now. On the remaining 2020s, you need to act now. The Navigator, the Corsair, the Nautilus, Aviator, and MKZ. Shop and buy from home. Digital showroom. It's open 24/7. Swift, safe, simple. Simply go to starlincoln.com. Prefer the phone? 888-356-1278. And remember, we feature remote pickup and delivery. Our award-winning service remains by appointment only between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. However, walk-ins for new vehicle sales continue to be from 9 a.m. until 6 p.m. Again, go to starlincoln.com or call them 248-354-4900. And coming to us live now from the hallowed halls of St. Elizabeth Seton in Naples, Florida, the star of our show. You know him, you love him. It's Father Joe Grimaldi. All is well in Grimaldi world?
So far, so good.
St. Elizabeth Seton is today's topic.
Terrific.
All right, I'm going to throw some things at you that you may know. You may not know, but they certainly won't embarrass you if you didn't know. An educated guess, in how many states do you think there is a church, a Catholic church, named St. Elizabeth Seton?
48.
Pretty darn close. All I can come up with is over 40. That's what it said. That's what it said at St. Google. She passed away at a very young age. She was raised an Episcopal and became a Catholic. She is the patron saint of Catholic schools, widows, and seafarers. Arg. Just like you, Father Joe. Well, it's perfect in your area, and the parish that you're at, St. Elizabeth Seton, it comes, in fact, with a grade school, correct?
Very much so, yes.
How big a school is that, Father Joe?
Well, in terms of size, I don't think Florida has many big Catholic schools, so we have about 200 students at the school.
Do you go over and say hello to the kids once in a while?
Once in a while, yes.
Yeah. Nice kids, are they?
They're kids all over the world, so it's good.
Some things just never change.
No, they don't.
It appears to me that she was an incredible woman, and I was thinking about this morning before we got set up. I was thinking, who are the most important women in the Catholic Church? And when I did the Google search on that, who was one of the first names that came up, and it was St. Elizabeth Seton.
Well, you and I know that in the 20th century, the Catholic school system just flourished like you wouldn't believe throughout the whole United States. And we always joke, but if it weren't for the sisters who worked in those schools day in and day out and did all of the essentials and the non-essentials, we know that many of the people would be without a good education, particularly without a good Catholic education. And one of the things I know is that very often the sisters did not have the opportunity of doing work beyond, let's say, a first degree or not even that, okay? But they were terrific drill masters. That's what I call them. And that they knew that repetition certainly is the mother of learning in so many ways. Repetition was very, very important in their way of teaching. Discipline was a very important way of teaching. And in those days, years ago, of course, it was not unusual to have 50 students in a class, which today people would say, wow, that's impossible. Well, it's not. Not only is it possible, but in those days, the sisters were able to maintain discipline as well as learning. I am very partial to the Sisters of Charity because I was educated by them in my early life. I was taught English by them, actually, particularly in the first, second, third, fourth grade. I had Mother Seton's sisters. It's interesting because their habit is different from the habit of most other nuns.
In what way?
Whereas, well, because most nuns would have a veil of some sort, they had a bonnet with a bow underneath their chin. It was just a bonnet, cape that came over their shoulders, but it was all in black, everything. But you knew right away as soon as you saw one of them, these are Mother Seton's nuns. In any case, they dressed a little bit differently. They certainly were in many of the schools in New York City, and they devoted themselves in teaching many children of immigrants. And they usually did a very good job of it. I'd say they did an outstanding job. It's interesting, where did she get her change of heart to become Catholic? I think, Ken, you could probably tell us, but because you looked it up today, I think.
Yes.
What did you learn?
I did, and here's what I have. One event that may have finalized her decision to convert was an action taken by the Anglican Church. In 1783, the church took its official name, the Protestant Episcopal Church. At the new church's first general convention, held in Philadelphia in 1789, the Anglican Book of Common Prayer was revised. Among the significant revisions was this: the former Book of Common Prayer had stated that at communion, the body and blood of Christ are verily and indeed taken and received by the faithful in the Lord's Supper. After the revision, it said the body and blood of Christ are spiritually taken and received. The old wording explains Elizabeth's intense devotion to the Anglican sacrament and then her eagerness to accept the uncompromising Roman Catholic belief in the real presence. Mrs. Seton was received into the Catholic Church by Father William O'Brien on March 14, 1805, at St. Peter's Church on Barclay Street. She paid dearly for her actions. Her former friends and fellow parishioners thought she was mad, and they developed a bitter opposition to her. Many of them tried to persuade parents to remove their children from a small boarding school she had opened for her own livelihood. Eventually, she left New York with her children, went to Baltimore, where she engaged in similar work. Through the struggles and tragedies she faced in life, she remained devout. She is the founder of the first Catholic schools, as I told you, and she established and grew the Sisters of Charity, who pray to cure others.
A socialite.
Quite a socialite, yes. She passed away in 1821 at the age of 46. So a young woman, certainly by today's standards, wouldn't you say?
By today's standards, of course. I would say this: she raised 5 children, and then her husband got very ill, and she took care of him. Eventually, she went to work for a family in Italy.
Yes.
And when she was there, that's where she was impressed with the devotion of this family that she worked with, because of their devotion to their Catholic religion. And so it was there that she first got the inkling to become a Catholic. Eventually, she did become Catholic, as we know, and she's a patron saint of a lot of things, particularly someone who is a mother, someone who is a foundress of a religious order, someone dedicated to the education of children. I think this is what makes her very famous and important in the Catholic Church. If you go to St. Patrick's Cathedral, one of the altars is dedicated to her, and you'll see her image. And even here, we have her image here with the little bonnet on her head and this type of thing.
Sure.
But that's Mother Seton.
It's interesting. I find it more and more fascinating, and I highly recommend that people do exactly as I did. Just simply start with Google, as we all do with everything, and look up Elizabeth Ann Seton, born August 28th. It doesn't really matter, but that's pretty close to our birthdays, of course. So, she was a Virgo, so she had to be sort of an obsessive-compulsive type. Liked order, right? Everything in its place.
Just like Ken. But go ahead.
Everything in its place. It does say here, as a matter of fact, that the shrine of St. Elizabeth Ann Seton is at 9 State Street in New York City, the site of her former residence. So there's some information that I just happened to find for you as well. She is entombed at Emmitsburg, Maryland.
Maryland,
yes. In the United States. So, but there was a process involved. It started with she was beatified by Pope John XXIII, who I barely remember as a small child. And then on St. Patrick's Day coming up, she was beatified and canonized by Pope Paul VI. So, an amazing lady. And there you are at St. Elizabeth Seton. And we have right here down the street, not too far from where you help out as well, St. Hugo. There's a St. Elizabeth Ann Seton church right there in that area as well. Fascinating woman. Fascinating woman.
You know, you mentioned earlier, she's the first native-born man or woman in the United States who was canonized. Because the first woman who was canonized, but not a native-born, would have been St. Frances Cabrini. You know, I guess she's outstanding in the education of the poor. Many of the schools were opened really to take care of the poor children. And I think of New York and Maryland and places like that. It's kind of interesting.
When people say words like shrine, national shrine, what's the added dimension to that particular venue? Not just a church. I don't mean to ever say just a Catholic church, but as opposed to being a Catholic church, it's a shrine, and then again, it's a national shrine. Why?
Well, because some churches have become such so that people can come from afar and pray in those for special indulgences. I know that for many people the word indulgence is a dirty word, but basically...
Wait, stop there for a second. Why? Why is it a dirty word?
Because in the 16th century, indulgences were abused by the church. It took Martin Luther to set people straight on that. But basically, for example, let's look at Detroit even. You have the Shrine of the Little Flower.
Of course.
Then you have the Shrine of St. Anne's. Now, both of those were made basilicas in a very short period of time, not long ago. And yet they're also shrines because they have some very good interests to the public. And that's where people could go and pray. They could also get indulgences for being present at that particular place. Usually in a shrine, you could find a confessor there for confession almost all the time.
Okay.
And that's one of the things that's peculiar to a shrine. But basically it's a special church, and it has popularity among not just the natives of that area, but even the world. So, you know, you speak about the Little Flower, St. Teresa of Lisieux. She's very much in demand, if you want, throughout the world. Speak about St. Anne, she's the patroness of Detroit, the mother of Mary, the mother of God.
Mm-hmm.
So you have two special places where it doesn't matter where people are from, but if they are those that like to visit shrines, they will look that up and find the Shrine of the Little Flower and also of St. Anne's.
A couple of quick questions and then onward and upward with a prayer for today. Do people go to the tomb of St. Elizabeth Seton, maybe in hopes of a cure?
Well, I'm sure they do,
okay.
But it's not a public.
It's not known for anything like that.
No,
I mean, you don't. No. There are places where you will actually see wheelchairs and braces and.
Yeah, you're speaking about Lourdes and Fatima,
right? Yeah.
Outside of those, no.
Okay. Here's one that I think that you and I, maybe I'll do the homework on this because now I'm curious. She had 5 children. I wonder what they ended up doing in life. They had to be very, very solid citizens and have carried on, so allow me to do that, and maybe we'll just touch on that a little bit next week. I remember, though, the second part of my question. What do you think the lifeline is for our Catholic grade schools? I think the high schools are in better shape than our grade schools. Maybe I'm wrong. Am I?
I'm no expert in that field, but I do say this, my opinion.
Yeah.
You're speaking about something in the the 20th century and the 19th century, when you had this large number of nuns coming from Europe and devoting themselves to the education of the poor. And that coincides with the great number of immigrants to the United States.
Sure.
So, for example, you had the Germans who kind of took over in Ohio, and they very often brought their own religious nuns with them to teach their kids. You had the Italians throughout the city of New York and Chicago and other places. So right now, the number of nuns is dwindling as far as you don't have the same number of nuns teaching in the Catholic grade schools.
Mm-hmm.
The lay people do a terrific job, but by the same token, let's face it, with the nuns being on the premises day and night, the nuns who devoted themselves completely to that work of mercy, really, of teaching and trying to teach for no money at all. I still remember where people would have to bring canned goods for the poor, but part of that was for themselves so that they could eat as well.
I do remember that. Mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of an interesting situation. However, one of the things I said at the beginning of this little podcast was that with the sisters, they were experts, I think, in the drill. They knew how to make sure that the kids always got the important facts down pat.
Right.
And so that when a kid finished grade school from a Catholic school, whether or not that person was Catholic, they knew the basic facts.
Yeah.
Oh, they didn't have all of the experimentation and things of that sort, that we have today. But they knew their basic facts. They knew their basic mathematics. And that was because even though the sisters did not have fancy degrees in those days, they do today, of course, but in those days, well, the thing is this, that they knew how to make sure that the children repeated, retained all of the basic information.
Yeah.
And I would say that, let's face it, I don't think that's happening in our schools today. I'm not saying they're not doing a good job. I think the lay people are taking it as a ministry. But let's face it, too, that they're not there day and night the way the sisters used to be.
And not only that, Father Joe, but they taught more than one class. I had the IHMs at St. Bede, and I think I had one nun at least 2 years. I think it might have been like second and third grade. And then later on, there was another nun that I'm told is still alive and doing very well, Sister Catherine Mary. And you're right, there was a bit of a basic training drill sergeant in all of the nuns that I had. So I just thought it was an interesting topic, women in the church, specifically the first American canonized, Elizabeth Seton, Saint Elizabeth Seton. With that said, and you being right now in the church we call St. Elizabeth Seton, Naples, Florida, would you be kind enough to end our podcast today with a prayer?
I'd be happy to. Of course, we're seeing a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel because of the COVID. And so our prayers go in thanksgiving to the Lord for even the little progress that has been made in this world. When this is over, may we never again take for granted a handshake with a stranger, full shelves at the store, conversations with neighbors, a crowded theater, Friday night out, the taste of communion, a routine checkup, the school rush each morning, coffee with a friend, the stadium roaring, each deep breath a boring Tuesday life itself. When this ends, may we find that we have become more like the people we wanted to be, that we were called to be, that we hope to be, and may we stay that way better for each other because of the worst. Amen. This is Father Joe Grimaldi, and I look forward to seeing you next time on the Father Joe Podcast.
We'd like to remind you to share the Father Joe podcast with your friends. You can reach Father Joe at frjoepodcast@gmail.com, and you can find us on Facebook or say, Alexa, play the Father Joe podcast. We look forward to seeing you next time.